Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today we're going to be deep diving our way into the UGREEN NAS solution software. UGOS, or UGREEN operating system, is the NAS software that's going to be included with the 2, 4, 6, 8 bay NAS solutions and the little flash 4 bay model. And this software is still very much in beta, as you can see, I think on one side of the screen or the other. You can see that we are currently running version 1.0.0.0483. This is by no means the final version that they are saying that these devices are going to arrive with, but in this video we're going to talk about what I like, what I don't like, things that impressed me, things that left me disappointed, and ultimately a good understanding about where this software is going. But before we remove me from the screen, because realistically you didn't come to the video to hear me, a few disclaimers. Number one, as mentioned, this is a beta. This is beta software. I would say it's only just come out of alpha realistically, and as much as I like the bells and the whistles, there is still very much things missing, and when I do come across those, when I am being critical about this software, let's be realistic, we are talking about something that is in development, not finished yet. Next up, there is also a mobile application that we'll be talking about later in this video that we'll be going into, so don't worry if you come for the mobile bit, go to the chapters on the bottom of the screen, and these will denote each different area that we're talking about here in the software. But let's crack on and talk about the user interface, shall we? Now, the user interface you see here is being accessed on a Windows PC and Google Chrome. There is a client application that you can utilize for Windows and Mac systems to find the device on your local area network and connect to it that way. When you do use this tool at the moment and you do log into the device, it comes up with a kind of quasi alternative to the web browser. There doesn't seem to be a synchronization tool at this time, but as you can see, this is our portal and that behind it is our web browser. It's pretty much exactly the same thing. It just means that we are utilizing that instead of our web browser. What that means in terms of power consumption, or moreover the performance of what we are utilizing at the same time in terms of resource, we'll have to wait and see. But for now, that application doesn't seem to support any kind of local synchronization tool. There is a sync tool that we'll be talking about later on in the form of sync and backup, but apart from that, I would say that tool is pretty much only to give you an alternative to the web browser here. The web browser GUI, to me, feels, I hate seagulls, super responsive here. We've got the task manager giving us real-time information about the system. I'm going to leave that running there in the background. We can access our user account details here, much on the top right. We can change our avatar, we can change our password, view our account activity, our storage quota, and associated UGREEN account for remote access. I will say straight away, I'm kind of disappointed there isn't any kind of OTP or 2FA services, for example, going into the control panel and security settings. We've got lots of information here with regards to auto-blocking and when passwords go wrong, adapting our firewall and opening up certain bells and whistles in order to ensure our connections are as secure or at least as limited as we would like, and the application of different certificates as well can all be conducted here, from Let's Encrypt to others. But keep in mind, none of these add up to 2FA. None of these add up to secondary authorization, where if someone gets hold of your credentials, they can get in. Now, almost certainly, when you go to the UGREEN access, and when you are accessing the device remotely, chances are that when you are connecting to it via their own servers, that in those instances, no doubt UGREEN server is going to be doing some extra authentication there in the background with the remote access. But nevertheless, I'm kind of disappointed at the lack of two-factor authentication. Now, on the other hand from that, I'm pleased to say that the admin account is disabled by default. When you do set it up, this is my dummy admin account there, and we put them into the administrator group. But when we do create our new users, we can create them very easily, give them certain amounts of control and access, add them into adaptable groups. All of these things are going to be very, very familiar to users of Synology NAS systems, and indeed QNAP NAS systems as well. Indeed, that control panel is very, very intuitive there. Everything is where I'd like it to be. I'd kind of like to see like a pro or an easy and advanced option here, because as soon as you go into these options, then you break down into a very familiar layout as we've seen from the likes of Synology, and along this layout everything seems to be pretty straightforward, but I think this is still going to be a little bit intimidating to more technically minded users, to less technically minded users, I will say. I will kind of highlight there are a few extra little neat extras, I would say, built into here. So for example, the LED functionality, the system has pure little white LEDs there on the front. It's nice to know I'm able to at least lower those on a scheduled time frame. And talking of scheduled time frames, you do have the option for that scheduled on and off startup routine that you can run for there, which is always nice to see, along with universal UPS support. And again, that can be utilizing different UPS protocols as well. So fair play to them. The options we've seen here early doors are all fairly normal, and I'm glad to see they're at least applying all these fundamentals here. As this is a beta, I'm going to put it out there. The fact that SSH was enabled by default, I was not a fan of, but because it's a beta, I'm prepared to let that go. But if they continue with the SSH mode being enabled at the full release of this software, that I'm less keen on. Indexing and file services, I'd say are pretty good on the background here. We've got that all being indexed pretty well and automatically in the background alongside with thumbnail generation. The native GUI search function here is very responsive indeed, allowing me to access different files on the system very, very quickly, as well as going directly into that universal search function to give me real-time information about the files inside the system. And I would argue it was pretty quick indeed, with a lot of the indexing being done automatically in the background of the system there. For those of a more analytical mind, heading back into the control panel, we can find out quite a lot of information about this device and how it's running. For example, this is running on that Intel Pentium Core 5-core processor there, with 8 gig of memory, listing the USB drive I've got connected with it. Lots of information with regard to the software. The storage is broken down quite neatly for us to, visually look out throughout the whole device, and with different, background information being ready and present to us. Heading back into that task manager from earlier, we're able to see the system utilization isn't too bad. It's not out of this world fantastic, but I will say it's still pretty good for what we're seeing here. We're breaking down there into the CPU, GPU, memory, network connectivity, hard disk activity. Again, I'm surprised SSDs aren't listed there, but we can get those listed there at the bottom, and the volumes that we've created all running there, and we'll go into the storage manager shortly. Via the service processes, we can see just where our resources are being used, and we do go as far as the processes as well. Indeed, we can end those processes if we choose, something that a lot of NAS brands have a tendency to disable, but at the very least I'm pleased to see it here. Talking of services and processes, it's worth highlighting that by default SMB services are enabled, but FTP, NFS, rsync, WebDAV, all of those are disabled by default. They are at least available, but they are disabled until you turn them on. So I'm kind of surprised they went to the trouble of doing that, but left on terminal anyway. And the default ports can be adapted at any time very, very easily, as well as, if you choose to, enabling other improvements within encrypted traffic and protocol there. If we go down at the bottom and go into the network settings, we can see a lot of the controls that we would like to go through in order to really make the most of our network connectivity. As you can see, this is a 2 network connected system. We've just gone on with a simple LAN here, and we can of course select from dynamic to static IPs, as well as adapting some of those MTU profiles as well. Again, with traffic controls, everything we're kind of used to in the world of NAS, but I do think it's worth highlighting that they are at the very least including this in their baseline application. Coming out of the control panel, let's head into the storage manager. The storage manager here gives us real-time information about the drives we've got, what they are doing, the pools, the volumes, and more. Now, here at the bottom, we're able to see lots of different statistics here happening with our storage. Indeed, there is a nice little widget option here at the bottom that allows us, if we remove one of these widgets here, it allows us to add individual widgets that may be more applicable to our own setup. So say, for example, we wanted to make sure that hard disk performance monitoring is available on that default overview page. We can add whatever we want, and it will add these pre-existing widgets to our layout of different statistics being presented to us from the available drives. If we've got an available drive, like you can see here at the top, click Go to Manage. It tells us one of our drives is available to be used. Click the 3 dots, click Use, and now we can choose whether to use, for example, this SSD for caching or use it for a storage pool. Again, the options are very straightforward, very clear, and easy to use. Heading into the storage management, you're able to see here that not only have I got a RAID 5 configuration in place with the 4 hard disks inside the main 4 storage bays here, but I've also gone ahead and created a secondary storage pool with a volume built into it. And this is a single M2 NVMe SSD inside there. We go to create. If we wish, we can create brand new volumes whenever we want, but of course we will have to make sure that we've got available drives in the system in order to do so. But support of ext4 or BTRFS is available straight out the gate. Another interesting extra in the advanced settings was support of quick repair, something that I believe is only available on Synology right now. This is when, if a drive fails in your RAID array and you introduce a new drive for repair and rebuilding, then you can actually choose to only have to wait for the areas of the newly introduced drive to build where data used to be, and then it zeroes out the rest of the drive. Ultimately, what that means is you won't be spending all of your time rebuilding a disk with empty data space, and it means a RAID repair can be a great deal quicker. Alternatively, they have included the RAID reprioritizing synchronization option there to allow the system to use more resources in order to get the RAID rebuilt rather than prioritizing performance numbers when you are trying to read-write from a degraded RAID. Looking at the individual disks here, if we choose to, for example, we can go into hard disk 1 and from there look at some of the options. We can go for a quick health check if we want, and we can run individual health plans that I'll show you in a moment to find out how healthy your disks are. On top of that, if we wish, we can go ahead and constitute data wiping if we want to completely clean the disk. But even though I went through it earlier on, it never seemed to be completely clear to me with a data wipe that what we were doing with this drive was actually a secure erase or not. So if you're listening, UGREEN, perhaps elaborate on what exactly data wiping is, whether that is a forensic secure erase or is it just a simple index deletion format there. The health test plan here allows you to create individual tailored plans to one or more disks and then have the system periodically check their health and produce reports based on that health. And if you'd like to constitute something like that manually, go to the three dots, select details, and from there, after running status, go to basic attribute, and it allows you to bench test the read and write performance of that drive on the fly as needed, as well as access the live smart information as well. And that affects both M2 NVMEs and hard drives if you choose. Moving away from the storage manager there, we can go to more traditionally understandable native file management here with the file explorer that's built into the web browser. Now, this is a fully utilized file manager. It's got everything you're going to need, whether you want to copy, paste, extract, archive, whether you want to create shareable links towards this data for internal system users or external, with rules of expiration, password protection, number of times it can be accessed, and more. But on top of that, you can go ahead and of course create shared folders. Shared folders allow you to create areas of storage within the system, and these, living on whichever volume you want to go for, will allow you to distribute and share data in these folders with connected client devices and other users. And of course, you can choose just what level of access those individual groups and users have, whether you want them to have read-only access, write-only access, or completely prohibit them from being able to see it at all. And I will add, this is another area where some of the design inconsistencies of this software do come through. I know it's a beta, but this being slightly off screen, regardless of whether I zoom in and out, isn't really pleasing to the eye. And I will add, while I'm on the subject, there is inconsistencies on the fonts between them. I know it's a very, very minor point, but I think that's one of those small visual issues that I think people will pick up on, and hopefully when this leaves the beta, that will be resolved. Now, on top of those shared folders, you may have already noticed there, if we do try to create a share, as we'll go for that one there, put it on volume 1, go for create, there isn't actually an option, as we allow access for our users, there's no option to encrypt that. And the same goes when we go to volume creation. If we're creating volumes on this system, there still isn't currently the option in a volume to add write once, read many support. So if we try to adapt our current volume there, switching over to another system here, what we can see if we create a brand new storage area, to make my point, we can go ahead, if we wish, create ourselves a RAID 5, and there's no option while we're doing this, selecting 3 of the drives inside that system, there is no option with regard to creating the volume to add write once, read many, or encrypted transmission there, or encrypted storage with an encryption key. I really hope that's something they roll in later on, but at least for now, the lack of write once, read many support and encryption is going to bum some users out. Now, copy and pasting data around the system, such as utilizing this external USB drive here, is incredibly straightforward. So, for example, if I go ahead and grab ourselves a folder here, we'll go for this Subrent rocket file here. We can go for the copy to option, or just quite simply click copy, go into another folder within the system. Let's go for NVMe share. Go ahead, right click, and paste and overwrite there. Now, that's already copying that data, but there's no notification here for what's going on. But if we go into the task manager, we can now see that that file is happening. Now, I don't quite like the idea that I have to manually go in to check whether that's transferring. It's a small quality of life improvement, but I'm kind of surprised there isn't a notification there on screen to tell me that that transfer is occurring. Nevertheless, at least it did the job, and it did the job smoothly there for me. So if we look at an average file there that we've just gone ahead, we can find out more information about it, and we can of course adapt who has access to it, which is always good. If we go into another folder here, let's go for multimedia share. I'm pleased to say that the majority of multimedia types I tried to play on this system did work. So for example, going into my Plex Media Server test file area here, we can go ahead with one of the jellyfish files, and we'll go ahead with an HEVC 10-bit file there. So again, this is a file in H.265. We can go ahead and play this file. Double clicking here opens up in that media player there at the top. So this is still inside the web browser, and from here, if we choose, we can downgrade the quality of that file. We can go ahead and play with some of the multimedia settings there. There's little odds and sods and options, and it's nice to be able to play it, but there isn't actually a video player application such as Synology Video Station or QNAP's Q Video app here. Now, coming out of that, if we go into something like photos, if we go to photos here and we try and look at a photo, so if we go for this album here, we'll just randomly select a photo. Let's go for that one. Opens up nice and neat, and again, we can choose to zoom in, zoom out. It's a very basic picture viewer there. But of course it is, because they have actually included their very own photo application with AI supported services that we're going to talk about later on there. But at the very least, we've still got the option, if we wish, go ahead, share the file, all of those different sharing rules apply. Now, one thing that I do quite like that I found while navigating the file manager is here at the top. We've got the personal folder management. This is when you're going to be synchronizing mobile phones and specific client devices with a preset folder. There was other options such as managing the shares and more, but what I really liked was this one, file deduplication. Rather than an automated back-end deduplication where the same file might come from multiple sources and the system keeps track, as useful as that is, it's also quite useful to have an option of a manual deduplication. So for example, if I wanted to know whether there were photos in that photos folder there that were also in my multimedia share, I'd select those two folders, click next, and allow the system to find potential duplicate folders in those two folders there. I'm going to leave that there running in the background. But that's really it in terms of the file manager. I quite like what we're seeing here. The options are a little basic, but at the same time, as long as they nail down the fundamentals, I'm happy. And if they could just, rectify some of those design elements there and the inconsistencies between some of these windows, I'm totally cool with what they've got going on here. And immediately, as you can see, duplicate files have been found. Some of these are background metadata as well related to the same image. So even the duplicated metadata there in the background has been clocked. So if we wish, we can just go ahead and choose just what extent we want to delete, what we want to get rid of, and what we want to keep. It's all built in there, and I quite like it. It feels, not as responsive as I'd like. Presumably it's because of the larger number of photos and it's found within the group, but nonetheless, I'm happy with what we're seeing here. Now, heading back into that photo application, let's talk a little bit about that. This is an AI-powered photo recognition tool here that's scanning through all of our archive of photos, and if you wish, you can use the AI-supported services for facial recognition. We can merge these faces together for categorization. Alternatively, you can use geographical information you've achieved from scraped metadata on the photos, such as mobile photos, and then display that information here on a map. I don't quite like the fact that China is the immediate geolocational area it shows you when I've got no photos taken in China, but I've got absolutely loads taken here in the UK. Surely you would go to where I've got them. Nonetheless, I quite like this map view. Again, very reminiscent of something like a Synology NAS and what other apps and services provide these days on other turnkey NAS platforms. Now, heading back into the app, we can go for the main kind of slideshow mode there, or if we choose to, we can go directly into a folder mode, but keep in mind that you can only access your personal directory using this app. So if you have images in a different folder, so in my case, I've got these shared folders and one of these has got photos in the multimedia share folder, it doesn't matter because the photo app has to work with this default directory here. Now, normally, I wouldn't be a fan of that. I've criticised Synology for it, and I'll criticise UGREEN for it if I must. But I will say the reason I'm going to be the most fractional lenient in their case is because when you go to the tools section and then from there go into the settings menu, you find out that the AI settings and the AI models that are included are actually a lot more broad. So for example, we've got blurry photo recognition, we have got here as well scene object recognition, person recognition, deduplicated photo recognition, potentially sensitive content recognition, recognition of text, recognition of pets. All of that is built into these AI models. And in that case, I'm sort of okay with the idea that all of the images are in one preset directory. Because if you're going to have that many AI models working, they probably work at their best when they're all running from the same directory for their resources. Nonetheless, I wish they did give me the option to select other directories for my media. The AI recognition also is quite useful for creating some of those smart filters to create your own custom albums. So for example, when you go back into the main broader view mode there, so we go to that one there, we can actually filter down quite significantly into when photos were taken, who is in the photos, going by their face, and from there use some of the geographical information. And then from there, once you've selected a few photos that befit a lot of that criteria, you can go ahead and start creating those smart albums, as you can see here at the bottom of the screen. Rotate the share the photos. You can go ahead and add them to pre-existing albums, download them locally, delete them. The options are all pretty straightforward. Again, tremendous, let's say, similarities with the Synology platform there all the way through. Carrying on with that AI, of course, if we can look at text recognition there, so we've got an image here taken from a supermarket, Morrison's here in the UK, and then from here we're able to use that text recognition, and it's pulled all of this information on the right from what we're seeing here on screen. It's not the most useful, but if this was a document or we'd scanned a document, this might actually be quite useful. Nonetheless, you know, as unfinessed as this is, I've not seen this supplied in this form from any other NAS brand. We've seen OCR readers on the QNAP platform, but they generally involve extra plugins. This is built in by default into the photo app, which is quite nice. Next up, let's talk about security. When we were looking at the control panel earlier, we'll be looking at different options to do with auto block and auto lockout and locking people from accessing the system. And of course, we can tailor the firewall if we choose from there. Again, I banged on about it. I hate that there's no two-factor authentication, but let's move on. Now, from that, we can go into the security manager tool. Now, I'm going to try to be as fair as possible when I say this, because I know it's a beta. I know some of these things are working on services for a hardware solution that is almost certainly not going to be formally released for months and months. But I'll say right now, I don't understand what this tool does. I understand it in a basic level. It is allowing you to scan the whole system if you like, put files into quarantine modes if you choose. From there you can go into the schedule, set up your new schedules to scan the system and what to do when dodgy files are found. You can look at the scan records if any compromised or malicious files are found. You can update the databases to find out more about intrusion protection, find out more about all of the protection of the system all the way through, and if potential malware files are found, you can decide what you want the system to do in order to stop them taking effect on your system. But I'll say right now, this security manager doesn't provide, and we'll stop it there for a second, it doesn't provide the feature that I want most of all. It can tell me right now that it will block suspicious files or pop them into quarantine, but from a security manager, what I want is to run it so it tells me, have I left ports open? Is my password too weak? Have I not got my firewall done correctly? Do applications, users or groups have too much information or too much access to parts of my system? Do I need to randomize my port numbers? Am I using a certificate when I need to? Have I allowed remote access via DNS identity? These are the things that I want to know, and this security manager is telling me if I've got virus-ridden files. I'm not suggesting that virus-ridden files and the potential for viruses and malware is not important. But what is way more important than that in terms of 2024 NAS attacks is ransomware protection. Protection in the form of write once, read many on my data to prevent unauthorized deletion. The blocking of users injecting malicious code, which will then make my system archive itself and force me to have to pay a hacker Bitcoin in order to unlock it. Viruses and malware aren't as rife as they were in terms of NAS, but ransomware attacks are, and this security tool currently in its current state does not give me the level of features and protection and advisories that I would like to see for that. The rest of the tools in the system are there. The ability, as mentioned, to block a lot of those ports, randomize a lot of those ports, change what level of access I can give a user to this system. But I don't like that the security advisor has the potential, or security manager gives the potential feeling of security that I don't think it warrants. Now, in terms of backup and synchronization, I'll say right now, I definitely get the feeling that this is an in-progress feature on the device. So I'm not going to go in hard. It does feel a little bit bare bones, but I can definitely feel that this is something they're building on. So for example, and we'll go into my mobile phone later, I've already connected my mobile with this device for mobile backups there. We can create a synchronized backup here between the UGREEN NAS and a remote access server there to back up the content of the NAS with a remote server. On top of that, in the control panel, if you go to the update and restore settings, you can back up your entire NAS configuration. So that's not the files and folders, but that is your settings, your users, and more, to a cloud backup onto the UGREEN account, or a local backup if you choose to, and then restore it if you need to. You can even reset the network identity as well very quickly from these options. But when it comes to synchronization with the UGREEN server, and we'll go for that one there, we can only synchronize currently with another UGREEN NAS, not a third-party rsync server like a QNAP, a Synology, an Unraid, a TrueNAS, but it looks like that is something incoming. I was kind of hoping we'd also have cloud synchronization too, with a backup and restoration, because again, we are talking about both directions, NAS to third-party or third-party to NAS. You've got that option to, again, target a remote rsync server here for that backup task, pop in the identity, and boom, you're good to go. Same goes if you want to go to a UGREEN server. You can create that two-way or one-way backup and synchronization option between those two key choices. And of course, restore a UGREEN NAS using that restoration from the backup file that you've sent over there. But keep in mind, again, no option to connect a Google Drive, a Dropbox, a OneDrive. Now, maybe that's a certification thing. Maybe that is an authorization thing with those third-party clouds. But it's a shame that it's not currently available in the beta. Remember, we are months and months and months away from full release, and this beta is far from complete. That said, I do like the administrator mode that allows the system admin to be able to micromanage all of the backups, or you can prevent them from doing so. And the same goes with versioning as well, that allows you to maintain all of those versions as needed very, very quickly. And again, this applies to any synchronized version of files that you have on the system, but also those backups like the mobile phone backup I mentioned earlier. Next up, let's talk about support. This system does arrive with quite a few little helping hand options into even its base level beta. Right now, I've enabled remote access for UGREEN to be able to access this system when I was having difficulty updating this system to the latest firmware due to my IP not being on their whitelist there to enable the latest updates, and it allowed them to remote access the system. Again, I've enabled it, so I'm covering it up with this document here, but that is an option you can do. And support is afforded to you via a number of different ways, over email, utilised on a contact number there, and of course their own online chat system there. So not out of this world, but it's still nice to have those options built in. But what I really like is the support section's app guide. They have gone to the trouble of fleshing out a full detailed offline access point there in terms of finding out exactly what to do with your system. Now, it still requires finesse. There's no denying that as we go through a lot of these options, there's font differences there. There's almost certainly going to be the odd typo. And hopefully, as we go through some of these options, although it is quite nice the way they've presented a lot of this information, I do think these help and guides are going to see a little bit more work as time wears on. But having them here, knowing they're being worked on, I find quite refreshing. And at the very least, quite useful knowing that these are all offline services for support there. Returning back to that homepage, you've got access to that online information center and the contact us where it allows them to support what you're doing. For example, if we go in and select network and actually spell network right, because I'm a numpty, you can go in and go directly to a lot of those support sections to help you out with your system. Having that baseline built in to the very ground of this OS is going to be hugely beneficial to those that are considering the UGREEN NAS system as their entry into a more affordable NAS system. Next up, let's talk about the App Center, because the App Center, it has to be said, at least in this beta right now, is looking a little thin. Now, what I mean by that, obviously, as it's a beta, each app being added is undergoing testing. And I would say of these 15 applications, at least 5 to 7 of them are baseline. For example, the content search, the control panel, the file manager, the log center. These I wouldn't even consider apps. These should be considered part of the bread and butter of the system. But there are some tools in here that are optional and ones that have been added since the previous version of this software that I played with. For example, a DLNA media server, allowing us to create our locally accessible over the network media server and selecting which directories we want to use. Coming out of the media center, we can have a look at the download center, allowing us to upload individual download links, torrent files, seed files and more directly onto the NAS to manage this. And this can also be handled, and I'll show you later, from the mobile application as well. On top of that, we've got access to the Photos app that we just talked about. We've got access to the Security Manager. We've got access to both the backup application and the version application we mentioned earlier on that allows us to revert back to the previous releases there. Indeed, when we look at some of these apps and services, so for example, when we look at the Photos application, we get lots of information about what the app can do. It's quite a familiar layout there. There's even a text editor document I was able to use earlier to modify some of the files in the back end when I was trying to get the system to allow me to access the system backend over SSH. I will say that the manual installation of apps, I tried uploading third-party installers for things like MB, Plex and Tailscale, and unfortunately they didn't work. They needed to be specific to UGREEN's own protocol there, which is a real shame. And lastly, needless to say, updates on it are conducted either automatically or manually, depending on your own needs. And if you wish, you can install specific applications to different areas. Now, whether it was that you watched the Q&A that we did with Hernan Lopez or updates from UGREEN themselves, they do have work, hopefully, happening right now on a container application. Whether a virtual machine application comes or that they're going to start introducing third-party applications, such as, container via Docker or Portainer, is yet to be seen. But right now, the base level applications, at least in this beta, although pretty, are fundamental and useful in terms of the general building block, I would be hard pushed to call them exciting apps, at least at this stage. Next up, let's head into the mobile application here. Let's log in and find a device on our local area network and log in nice and easily. We go in, we log into the app, and I've got to say, for a single app that is trying to do everything on this system, fair play to them. It's a good app. The mobile application, although not perfect, is probably one of the best representations of a Swiss Army knife mobile app I've looked at from turnkey NASes in a very long time. I've always been personally someone who quite likes a dedicated photo app for photos, a dedicated video app for videos. For example, when we look at Synology's apps, we can see they've got dedicated apps for different services, the same with QNAP. And UGREEN here have got one app trying to do all of it. So normally I'd give them quite a lot of criticism for this, but arguably I think they might have pulled it off. It's not perfect, and as I'll explain why, you'll see what I mean. But for the most part, I really like it. If we go to the controls here at the top, for example, we can manage what we're doing here. We can choose, for example, when it comes to backing up, whether we're going to use Wi-Fi or cellular data. We can change notification rules, what we can hear, what we can't, whether we want this application and indeed this user to get notifications and alerts and warnings from the system. And on top of that, when we go back into the range of apps and services, there is pretty much nothing we can't do here compared with the desktop. We go into the control panel. The layout is pretty much identical with the same level of options. Do we want to, for example, create and add a new user? We can do that from the mobile application. Do we want to create a new shared folder, enable different remote access services? We can do that here from the desktop of the mobile app. Device connections, we can manage different connected users, whether we're using the UGREEN remote services. We can even go into hardware and power and change some of those nice background and scheduled operations, including hard drive and USB hibernation for those that are going to be doing USB backups directly from the mobile tool here. It's all accessible. All the information is immediately apparent to us, and I really like how much control this app feels like it gives me. And that goes all the way down, by the way, to the storage too. There's almost no thing that I can do on the desktop that I can't do on the mobile. This might be one of the most heavily featured mobile apps I've ever used, and with the areas of the desktop GUI that felt a little bit inconsistent design-wise, this mobile app absolutely crushes it in terms of the level of control that I've got of my fingertips. Now, it can be a little bit overwhelming as I'm cycling along. For example, as you saw me cycling through there, that's not even the half it. Some of the analytical information that can be thrown at you is actually pretty deep. Obviously, it's going to be down to you if you choose to go through all of these, but the mobile application can't really be said to not give you all of the information you need to utilize this device generally. Again, from the notifications that we sent through to your mobile device, whether you want to go ahead and install new applications via the App Center there, all of it can be done, and therefore the whole system managed remotely here using your mobile GUI. Remember, this is a beta app too, available for iOS and Android, and right now it's pretty much given me everything I want to do on this system at my fingertips. Now, if we go into the photo application there, this is where things can get quite interesting. As you can see here, this is allowing me to browse all of the photos on the NAS. I'm pleased to say that it's loading all the thumbnails beautifully quickly, so if I scroll lovely and quick, we can see, and yes, I'm accessing it over the local area network, but it's still pulling up these photos lovely and quickly for us there. And we can pull up real-time information about the photos as well. We can even choose to download them locally if we choose. Again, managing those share options if we like, using different sharing services, and also creating just a general share link if we choose here from the mobile that we can send via SMS, Facebook Messenger, or whatever. And that breaks down, by the way, remember, to that facial recognition as well. So if we wish, we can actually go via the facial recognition, enter a new person, and there you go, boom, we've still got control of all of those. It's a shame we don't have object recognition, but at the very least, we've got all of that geolocational information, and even the map seems to run, I would argue, that little bit better on the mobile application overall. For those inquiring about the synchronization and backup of mobile data, well, that comes down into two different areas. We go to synchronization and backup there, and that tool allows us to back up the content of our phone if we wish. So if we like, we can go there and back up the photos from our phone. Select the destination on the NAS that we want to send the photos to, as you can see there, and then you can even say how you want the data to be sorted once it gets sent at the other end. And again, you can choose if you wish to use Wi-Fi or cellular data. Now, that is going to be really useful for those that are backing up photo data, but what about bog standard normal data? Well, unfortunately, it doesn't look currently like you can just back up all the data on your phone, like one big block backup. You can go into the file manager, select, for example, a folder on the NAS, select the plus symbol, and then choose to upload a photo, a video, music, or general documents if you wish. Alternatively, you can go ahead and create a new folder on the NAS. From there, create a folder and start dumping data into that, but you can't create a whole phone-sized backup on the device from your phone onto the NAS. Again, not a lot of people would use that, but still nonetheless, I know someone put a request in the comments during the Q&A about phone backups, so I thought I should address that here. Even the universal search is very responsive here when we're trying to search through the NAS for different kinds of photos or different kinds of files. For example, there we go, there's that Subrent report there. We can go ahead and access that image just as however we see fit there on the NAS. It's that quick, that responsive, and I really like this mobile app. I would say for what misgivings the desktop service gave me, the mobile application has clearly been one of the larger priorities of the brand, or the main means with which you are going to interact with this system. And you can tailor this output quite a lot as well by adding other references and other cards here to the desktop that allow you to add other services for you to monitor from this single interface here. And again, you can find out lots of information, rebooting the system, accessing the control panel and the health of your system very quickly via this GUI. Ultimately, I find it very difficult to fault this mobile app above and beyond them trying to do so much in one window, and therefore you've even got the search function built in there at the top. But let's head back onto the desktop and summarize what we think of the UGOS NAS software beta. So, what do I think? Well, I'll say right now, the mobile application for me absolutely kicked bottom. It was most certainly the premier way to interact with the system. The desktop, it feels like the desktop GUI still needs a little bit more work in terms of consistency and some of the layout of some of those options. Also, I wasn't overly keen on some of the position of some of the security options, but given that this is an early beta, it makes it very tough to come down particularly hard on those, knowing that these may be things that get added later on in terms of securing the platform. So my complaints about OTP and 2FA services, I'm going to have to hold judgment on that. I will say, alongside a lot of other testers, I have noticed that SMB performance on these systems isn't ideal right now, and in communication with the brand several times, and I know I'm not alone in this, with other people that are currently testing a lot of this software, the SMB performance is being optimized there. So I didn't want to include specific performance in today's video because it seemed a little bit unfair given that we were looking at the overarching software and that the hardware architecture of all of the different systems do range from an M100 to a Pentium to an i5 processor. So for now, I'm holding off on that. But in terms of the software, I will say that the fundamentals appear to be there. I'm not going to call the software exciting. It's not. NAS, for all of my YouTube videos, isn't meant to be exciting. It's meant to be stable and it's meant to be reliable. And the fundamental building blocks I'm seeing are seemingly going that way. It's just right now, I think in terms of security, more needs to be done. Things like the security manager. I don't feel like this is doing enough for me, and I just feel like the security manager needs to address more kind of base level insecurities that a person might put their system into and allow you, or at least alert you and address you to change those things, such as, again, to do with weak passwords, to do with two-factor, to do with having non-randomized ports and stuff like that. I like the file manager. The file manager felt very responsive, barring a few different kind of alert systems where it wasn't telling me when read and writes were happening there. I liked the support section and the amount of information it was providing to me throughout the course of utilizing it. If I was a novice user, the task manager was giving me lots of good, useful, real-time information about my system when I was utilizing it. The App Center, not going to call it exciting, but I will say at least the building blocks are there for something exciting. The storage manager, I thought, gave me plenty of information about my individual disks, but once again, until we know that the performance has been optimized, or at the very least that they have officially said that this is going to be the version of the software we're going to get, I'm holding off slightly on that, but at least in the presentation it's there. I just wish we had support of write once, read many, and encrypted volumes or shared folders. Overall, I like what I'm seeing, but it definitely still feels like a beta. It definitely feels like it's not quite ready, and inconsistencies in the presentation and inconsistencies across some of the applications and services still need to be addressed. Overall, I like what I'm seeing, and I tell you what, for a NAS brand, or a brand in the world of NAS, that is releasing their first product, this is a very confident software release. Those of you that are looking at things, say the ZimmerCube and other NAS that I genuinely like, it should be added that when they were bringing out CasaOS and the early ZimmerOS, they were nowhere near as established as the software that we've looked at today. So I've got to give them credit for that. But I still don't feel that UGOS is a finished NAS software platform. And hopefully by the time that crowdfunding has started, or at the very least is most of the way along, we will see a more confident presentation of this software and maybe the addressing of some of the slight niggly bits that I didn't enjoy about the software in this preview. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. We've got the hardware review of the prototype DXP4800 and DXP480T coming in the next week or so, so do stay tuned for that. I made this video first because the software is universal to all of those releases, so I thought it important to get this done first. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more content on this. Check out the article in the description, which is the full written review of the software. Look out for that. And apart from that, I'll see you next time.